Foremost, Jake, I want to thank you for coming on. Uh, Before getting you on, I got to watch a bunch of your interviews, right? Pickman, all these people. So I want to start off with two things. One, when I first heard about you, dude, like back in the day, I was like on the Reddit forums, right? When the Capitol stuff went down, I didn't know a thing about you beforehand, right? Uh, Everything happens. I see this guy with like the fur hat with the horns or whatever, and I initially thought like, oh, this is some fool, this is some Antifa idiot, you know, and I could not have been further from the truth, man. Like you surprised me as an individual when I started digging in on you. I, so first off, I just got to admit that from Giggle, my first impression was absolutely wrong. Uh, can you start just like what got you to the Capitol that day? Start there, and then let's kind of move on your journey there, because obviously you can tell people who you are better than I can.
Sure. But given that you talked about Reddit, I think it's important to note that I had a friend of mine that spent a lot of time on Reddit. And he followed certain people on Reddit. That's where he got most of his news.
Okay.
And when all this stuff happened with the thing at the Capitol, he started listening to what these people that were on Reddit that he'd been following about politics and stuff like that for a long time, he started listening to what they were saying about me. And he came to find that nothing that they were saying was true. And he had a real cognitive dissonance because he knew me personally. And then he's listening to what all these people are saying. And he's realizing, well, they're totally wrong about him. They're totally wrong in everything it is that they're saying. None of this is true. So he had to have this like come to Jesus moment where he had to ask himself, how many other things were wrong that these people were saying, that because he had no knowledge on them, he just accepted them without question.
Yep.
Because he now knew that they were 100% wrong about me. So that, I think, is something that a lot of people have experienced, whether it be people that I knew or people like yourself, that they find that what the media or people online are saying is so far from the truth that it creates a cognitive dissonance. And they think to themselves, well, what else have I been lied to about?
Yep.
Now, that being the case, to answer your question, a lot of people were lied to about my motivations that day and what exactly it is that got me to DC. First of all, I went to DC both on December 12th for the second MAGA Million March, and I went in full regalia. Media did not seek to exploit my image. And I also went on January 6th. Both cases, I had no real financial ability to get there. I had no real transportation to get there. I didn't have a place that I was going to be staying. All of those things were, I was unable to pay. And yet the Red Sea parted. God created a path for me to get there, transportation, lodging, all of these things. And in both cases, all I had to do was pretty much pay for my food. And I had a discounted enough of a lodging to where I could pay the first time that I went. And the second time that I went, I was told by the people I was going with, don't even worry about it, bro. We got you.
Right on.
So the conditions that arose that allowed me to go to DC were most certainly divine providence. That, I guess, is one of the biggest reasons why I went, because I mean, I have a lot of reasons for going. The ley lines, the notion that DC is actually kind of like a sacred site, that there's all these long string of abuses that have taken place over the last several decades, where the federal government is not just abusing its power, but abusing the American people, using its monopoly on the initiation of force and violence to procure our tax dollars, which income tax was never a part of the founding documents. So in a sense, we're talking about theft of our money, and then the redistribution of that wealth to less than 1% of the population. And then there's other things like the JFK assassination. There's other things like, the Russia hoax, Benghazi, 33,000 emails being deleted, no prosecution, the finders and the child trafficking that's taken place on behalf of the government for decades, the Franklin cover-up. Then there's things like spying on Trump, spying on his campaign, trying to destroy his presidency, stabbing him in the back over and over and over again. And then there's the whole COVID lockdowns, which everybody in a way kind of experienced being on house arrest, federal house arrest.
Yep.
Everybody also experienced what it was like to have total government apathy when it comes to the destruction of our system and the infrastructure. When it comes to the BLM Antifa riots, then we have the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, and then we have the 2020 election. So there's this long string of abuses. I didn't even get into like Waco, Oklahoma City, or 9/11 or the Boston bombing or whatever. So there's this long string of abuses that have taken place over decades. And I'll just say that my reasons for going to DC were more spiritual than political.
Okay. Now, is it, since you kind of opened the door on that, the faith that you follow seems, it's at least uncommon for me, right? Do you mind touching on that? Explaining like what your explain your faith if you don't mind. I mean, obviously you don't owe
Sure.
the explanation.
So shamanism is the oldest religion in the world because it was the first religion. Shaman is actually a Siberian or a Mongolian term,
Okay.
and it simply means the one who knows. So a man or a woman can be a shaman. Now, anthropologists have chosen to use that term shaman or shamanism to paint all indigenous philosophy, because all indigenous cultures practice some form of shamanism. All indigenous philosophy with the same brush of shaman or shamanism. Shaman is just basically like a medicine man or medicine woman. When we say the one who knows, we're talking about the one who knows what plants are there to heal, what plants are visionary, what songs to sing, how to heal, etc., how to cast out demons, perform exorcisms, etc. So that is the kind of knowledge that they know, the one who knows, right? Now, if you look into, oh, my phone just went off. Let me, that's rather unprofessional of me. Allow me to silence my phone for a moment here.
Yeah, do whatever you gotta do, my guy.
So, shamans or shamanic cultures all essentially believe in some core tenets that are pervasive throughout all shamanic societies. Number one, they believe in a unifying life force or spirit, or a unifying energetic field that impregnates all creation with life, or God, right? They all believe in God. Number two, they all believe in the spirit world, right? And this idea that within the spirit world, there are positive and negative entities,
Okay.
right? Number three, they all believe in the power of song, dance, singing, drumming, right? To create an altered state of consciousness so that they can interact with the spirit world and connect with God, as well as banish evil spirits and invite good ones. Number four, they all believe in the power of healing and the allying themselves with positive spirits or with God to create healing, or to use song or drumming and singing and dancing to create healing. They also all believe in sacraments and certain plants or fungi in the ecosystem that are healing in nature or have the ability to create altered states of consciousness that allow the shaman or the people of the tribe to experience the spirit world and to dissolve this illusion of separation and integrate their consciousness into the truth of unity. They also all believe in this notion of like what's called an ordeal. So you go through something that's very difficult and arduous, in some cases even painful, to strategically avoid what are called negative timelines. When I say negative timelines, I mean things like drought, famine, disease, war, chaos, etc. And in going through these ordeals, they believe that they can become an anchor for positive timelines, where there's an abundance of water, an abundance of food, there's no disease, there's no war, etc. They also all believe in the power of prayer and meditation, and the way that prayer and meditation can be an altered state of consciousness that allows the shaman or the people of the tribe to create healing or to get in touch with positive spirits in the spirit world or to commune with God. Now, if you look at that basic fundamental foundation for shamanism, then you graft that basic fundamental foundation to all religions on the planet, then in a way, all religions on the planet are practicing different forms of shamanism. They're speaking different tongues, they have different labels, but at the end of the day, they're all practicing shamanism.
That's interesting, buddy. I've never had that presented in that way. And give me 1 second. I want to show you something since we're on this subject, actually. I had seen this experiment done many a times online, and I had decided it would be a good potential lesson with my daughter. So we kind of put together a video. And have you ever seen the rice experiment by any chance, buddy? Where you take some rice,
yes,
and
very
you got
much
hate
so.
rice and you got love rice. So we started this, and I expected it was going to be like, minimum of a week, but at least a 2-week ordeal of updating, right? This shit has blown my mind. Okay, the whole concept was determined. Do your words have an impact on physical manifestation? And according to this, the absolutely yes. Like the hate, the hate rice got mold well within the inside of the week and was just going. The love rice, I mean, there's nothing going on there, and I got no reason to bullshit anybody on that experiment. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that just like says so much, and I even catch myself to try to understand now. Once you see that for yourself, right? Like, and now you got to internalize it. What exactly does this mean in all these other different aspects of my life now, right? Like, you really got to start being on guard of your thoughts and whatnot, because it leaks through, right? I mean, it's so. Could you maybe help me become better informed on things such as this, if you don't mind?
Well, are you familiar with Dr. Emoto?
Is that the gentleman who did the water study?
That's correct.
Yes, I am, and that is wild. And why do we not talk about that anymore? But please go with it.
Well, they kind of speak to the same concept, that our thoughts, our emotions, our words, our actions are of profound impact. So in our culture, we have been trained to believe and conditioned over the entirety of our lives to believe that our thoughts and our emotions, our words and our actions are of little consequence. And that ultimately we must trust authority when it comes to what to think, what to say, what to do. When we look at the profundity to the effects of our thoughts, our words, our emotions, our actions on the external world, whether it be rice in a jar or water in a bottle, we have to then take responsibility for the fact that we are profoundly and intimately connected to the world and the universe that we live in. That our thoughts and our emotions are essentially electromagnetic frequencies that are innately interconnected to all creation and have a very real impact, not just on our bodies, but on those around us, on the very world itself. And this is why the propaganda has sought to create a tremendous amount of apathy regarding our thoughts, our emotions, our words, and our actions. Because if we don't use that power, then somebody else, authority, will attempt to use that power that we have in us so that they can move toward their goal or their end, right? So we are essentially a means to an end for these authority figures. And think about this. If you are hating somebody because of a political ideology, right, that is based on misinformation and propaganda, then you are essentially not just projecting hate onto others. And if you saw, the rice and the mold and all that stuff, right, you're projecting that onto others. But you're also contaminating your own vessel with those frequencies, creating an environment for dis-ease or disease, right? Because you're not at peace internally, you see? And when a person is not at peace internally, when they have anxiety or they're depressed, if they're angry or outraged or whatever, they are much more easy to control.
Yes. So how's a guy like you fall into this? Is this something that, say, you learned from your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncle? Like, what got you into shamanism and to actually look at things that aren't just, like mainstream presentations?
Well, I've always been interested in it ever since I was a child. Something told me as I looked at these, in particular, Native Americans wearing the feather headdresses or the fur and the horns and the face paint, banging a drum, dancing around a fire, that there's something that they knew that we had lost in the materialist West. And I wanted to know what they knew. I mean, think about it. Our ancestors lived and thrived in some of the harshest environments on the planet.
Yeah.
They weren't stupid. Right? They were not primitive. So something told me that they knew something that we did not know, that we had lost by getting lost ourselves in the materialist world and thinking that materialism or material is all that there is. Newtonian atomistic philosophy. So I'd always been interested in what they knew. I've always wanted to have, and I have always essentially had, a personal relationship with my Creator, with God. I wanted to know what they knew. I wanted to know and experience what Jesus knew and experienced, what his real name's Yeshua, but what he experienced. I wanted to know and experience enlightenment like the Buddha. So I'd always been interested in that. Later on in life, when I found out about things like hallucinogens and things of that nature, fungi, peyote, etc., I was fascinated. Like, well, what do you mean you see things?
Right.
Like, what do you see? That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And I'd seen in cartoons when people got drunk enough, they saw things like pink elephants and stuff. And I was like, is it like that? And I never got a satisfactory answer. So that was also a part of my intrigue. What ended up happening for me is that because I wanted to have a personal relationship with God so much, and because I sought to understand all religions and their philosophies and how it is that they think the world was created, who God is, what our role is in life, I looked into every single religion on the planet in depth. And eventually I was like, well, I've looked into all these religions. Let's look into shamanism. Let's see what that's all about. And that was when I kind of came to discover that all these religions that I had looked into were actually practicing different forms of shamanism. And when I say I looked into every religion, I'm not just talking like Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, the stuff of the East. I'm not just talking about Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Sikh, paganism. I didn't just look into those things. I also looked into things like Satanism and Luciferianism. Okay. Not because I was interested in practicing it, but because like when I looked into Hinduism, it was because I was thinking to myself, like, what's the deal with worshiping cows And why do they have all these different arms and faces and stuff, like, and all these garish looking gods? Like, what is the deal here? So I looked into that. And then when I looked into, the reason I looked into Satanism is I said to myself, why would anybody worship the devil? Like why would anybody practice evil? I don't understand. So I looked into it. And what I came to find is that all of these religions or these practices were essentially practicing different forms of shamanism. And yes, that goes for Hinduism, Christianity, and Satanism and Luciferianism. They're all essentially practicing the same template, but they're practicing it with different intentions, different ceremonies, different sacraments, different prayers, different songs and dances, etc., etc.
I don't mean to be that guy, but do you DMT, bro? Have you?
I've done. DMT? Oh yeah, I've done DMT. I've done both NN-DMT and 5-MeO.
Okay. So I did it. I remember my main takeaway being the feeling of man. It had a very Hinduistic vibe. I remember as I was coming out. I remember thinking, wow. Like, I gotta look more into that. For some reason, as, because the walls had different layers to them as I'm kind of like coming back between the two experiences, and that really, really stood out to me. And it made me think, like you had talked about, why do they have all these different hands, right? And it's like, I don't know necessarily if it's meant that, like, Shiva's supposed to have so many hands, or if each of those hands is just kind of like another frame, of her doing something through emotion. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Kind of like
well, from what I understand, the reason why they have so many arms and why they have things in their hands is, well, in particular, in some cases, it's because of the 8 arms or 8 limbs of yoga. Right? So there's all these different elements or aspects to yogic practice. Yoga is actually more of a mental and spiritual practice than it is a physical one. Stretching is just one of the arms of the 8 limbs of yoga. Now there's other elements to it, things like the multiple different arms and the things that they hold in their arms are representative of different spiritual powers or siddhis.
Okay. With the ley lines, like you said, for the city, like where Washington is taken over, laid over, do you mind talking about that and overall and where and why certain cities and whatnot tend to be built where they are, and how when you look under them, you can see like there was another major city that 9 out of 10 times. Do you mind getting into some of that for me? Because
sure,
you seem like to be the guy who would know a little something.
Well, let's start by saying that our history is deliberately being kept from us. If you control a person's perception of the past, you control their perception of the present and the direction that they go in the future. I will also say that for those that are laymen in this regard, we all know that the Earth has an electromagnetic field that surrounds it, right? It protects us from solar radiation and things of that nature. Well, that electromagnetic field doesn't just surround the Earth. It goes all the way down to the core, which means that there are certain locations on the crust where the lines, these electromagnetic lines or ley lines, actually cross each other. And where they cross one another, the electromagnetic field of the planet and the frequencies of that electromagnetic field are heightened dramatically. And this is why the ancients built pyramids, obelisks, temples, medicine wheels, etc., on these locations, because they were harnessing this electromagnetic energy. They were harnessing this spiritual energy in these locations by building these buildings upon them, in particular with stone. And in many cases, like, for example, the pyramids in Giza and the Great Pyramid, the stone, it's not just stone, it has tremendous amounts of quartz in it.
Okay.
So the quartz is channeling this energy and having a quantum effect, is having an effect in the quantum realm. And places like the King's Chamber inside of the Great Pyramid are a location where an individual can go in and lay inside of this chamber, lay inside of this thing that anthropologists say is or archaeologists rather say is a coffin, right. But it's not. It's actually like a tuning fork. And you lay in this thing, and then you're in the apex of where this energy from the cosmos is meeting the energy of the earth.
Okay.
Right? And then so in the process, you have this ability to embody larger amounts of energy. Your thoughts and your emotions are more intimately connected to the electromagnetic grid system of not just the planet, but the entirety of the cosmos. And the same goes for the pyramids all over the world, whether they be in Mesoamerica, in Bosnia, in China, all over the planet. There's these pyramids. And funny as it is, a lot of people don't realize that the pyramid in Bosnia, or pyramids in Bosnia, and the pyramids or one in particular in China, actually dwarf the pyramid in Giza. The pyramid in China, the pyramid in Giza is 420 feet high. The pyramid in China is 1,200 feet high. Okay. So there's a lot that goes into this understanding, and it is actually rooted in shamanism. Now, unfortunately, what has taken place over the millennia is that these sacred sites where once the shaman was ingesting copious amounts of psychedelic plants or fungi were then replaced by evil priests or evil shaman, and the kings, whether they be like the Aztecs, for example, and they were doing human sacrifices.
Right.
And so this was plugging into the grid system tremendous amounts of trauma and fear.
Right.
And in the process, they were essentially traumatizing the collective consciousness of humanity. And they were altering the timelines for the earth. Because when you take a human being out of the equation, when you take a human being off of this planet, you are affecting the timeline of the planet, because now that human being is not, say, having children, they're not eating food, they're not contributing to society, they're not contributing to the ecosystem, etc. So you're altering the timeline. And the Aztecs boasted that in a single day, they executed and sacrificed 80,000 people. What kind of an effect is that having on the timelines for the earth? And what kind of massive amounts of trauma is being plugged into the grid system when an unwilling participant is being laid on a sacrificial altar, having their heart cut out in front of them, their head chopped off, and then thrown down the steps?
Right. Now, why do you think they use trauma and trauma bonding so much on the populace, if you don't mind? Or
well, it's a form of mind control. So, and every parent knows that sometimes when their kid does something really, really dangerous, sometimes it helps to give them a swat on the ass so that they correlate whatever they were doing with pain, right? Yep. And you're doing this largely to protect your child from doing something that would cause far more damage or far more pain, right? But if you look into things like MK Ultra or what is called satanic ritual abuse, what you will find is that tremendous amounts of trauma have the ability to fracture the mind, to compartmentalize the mind, because the mind ends up trying to protect itself from that traumatic experience. And then this trauma is compartmentalized in the subconscious portion of the brain. And if the trauma is extensive enough or repetitive enough, then you can end up creating an alternate personality. where that personality steps in, that compartmentalized version of the person steps in for the trauma. And so a good example, have you seen Captain America Winter Soldier?
Yeah, back when it came out, I gave it a...
Okay, so remember in that movie how Bucky, his Captain America's friend, Winter Soldier, he was abducted by the Soviets.
Okay.
And they traumatized him through pain. And when they were doing so, they read a very specific sequence of words that had no real meaning to one another. But if they were said in sequence, it was like a mental key that could be placed into his mind, turned, and then this compartmentalized Winter Soldier, weaponized person would then be unlocked. Right? So that, if you understand how that can be used against individuals, you can also understand how it can be used against the population.
So you're just taking the concept of like the Manchurian Candidate and just magnifying it ad nauseum upon everyone because that's how it's being used.
Now think about this. Trauma. 9/11.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
There was a fracture in the psyche of America. Now, yes, there was a unifying group of element to this because we're getting together, we're being patriotic, we're going to war in Afghanistan to stop the terrorists, right? But there was also a tremendous amount of people that were saying, no, let's not go to war.
Right.
You see, and now the people that want to go to war because of patriotism and going and getting the bad guys are now in opposition against the anti-war people who are trying to question the narrative about, wait, why are we doing this? You see? And so now you have a society at war with each other. Similar to how you have a mind at war with itself, you have a country at war with itself. And then that division can be strategically used by the individuals creating the trauma to mobilize a nation for war, similar to how you can mobilize an individual to perform assassinations.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm tracking you. I follow. Let's kind of, same thing, kind of loop around stuff. Who do you think, where do you think we do come from, right? What civilization was here 10,000 years ago? Who made the pyramids, or what was the civilization that we've kind of lost? You know, like if we're a species with amnesia, if you will, you know, what is it that we've forgotten? What is your theory on that? If I might, you know.
Well, let's start with the Vedas and the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. According to the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, there was an ancient civilization that was in fact global. They had what were called vimanas, these bell-shaped craft that had the ability to fly through the air at tremendous speeds and basically had anti-gravity technology. They also had things like nuclear weapons. And this is where Oppenheimer got the quote, "Behold, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds," right? And if you look into the Vedic text and the fact that they say there was, in reality, a nuclear holocaust that took place, and according to the Hindu historians, this was over 100,000 years ago. Now, is there archaeological evidence that corroborates this text and this theory? And the answer is yes. If you look into a place called Mohenjo-Daro in India, you will find that there are ancient ruins, stone ruins there in this location, but there's also vitrified stone, okay? Which vitrification is when you have stone that has been heated so much that it has been turned into glass. Okay. You also, at the epicenter where this vitrified stone is in Mohenjo-Daro, you have tremendous amounts of radioactive isotopes, which can only be created through artificial nuclear explosions. Now, Mohenjo-Daro is not the only location throughout the world where we see this.
Okay.
There's places in Turkey, there's places in Scotland, places in Africa, places in Asia and Mesoamerica, all over the world that we see this exact same thing. So there's a lot of speculation, especially by Hindu scholars, but also by people that are just seeking the truth, that humanity has destroyed itself multiple different times. And if you even look into, for example, the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, what you will find is talk of an ancient nuclear war or nuclear explosions that took place in the Middle East. We are the inheritors of multiple different collapses of global civilization.
Okay.
We have risen to a certain level of technological prowess and innovation that was not rivaled by our spiritual evolution.
Okay.
And because we were children playing with a matchbox,
okay,
we burned the world down. And if you look into the work of Graham Hancock and the Magicians of the Gods, his book, you will find that the narrative of the flood taking place, a global flood, is pervasive throughout all indigenous cultures around the planet. Now, there's also the whole thing about like Atlantis and Lemuria, which a lot of people say is, just folklore. However, if you think about the notion that during the Ice Age, there was oceans worth of water frozen at the northern polar ice cap, right? Which means that sea levels were much, much lower, right?
Okay.
Now, if that is the case, then that means that there could very well have been large portions of land, both in the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans, that were not covered by water. Also, if you look into Vedic legend or Vedic text, Shiva was living in a palace or a temple off of the coast of what is now India, and that place, I believe, was called. I think it was Derinkuyu, but I may be wrong about that. But this palace was a part of Hindu legend for a long time. I don't think it's Derinkuyu. I think that might be the place that's in Turkey. But anyway, point is that archaeologists that were searching for treasure off of the coast of India using sonar came to find the ruins to this city. They stumbled upon it, but it was under hundreds of feet of water.
Okay.
Which means that this story of Hindu legend that Shiva lived in this palace in India and it was in this specific location that's now underwater that people thought was just legend, that's true. And if you look into there's that massive complex off the coast of Japan that is submerged underwater, then obviously that wasn't built underwater. That was built when there was a time where sea levels were much lower. Yep. If you go off of the coast of a bunch of Polynesian islands, what you find is that there are stone ruins underneath the Polynesian islands. If you look at the terrain, especially here in North America, but all over the world, you will find that there was tremendous amounts of water all over the planet. I mean, the pyramids in Giza were covered by sand. Let us not forget that.
Right.
All right. Now, that sand didn't get there over hundreds of years of the blowing wind. That sand was moved there with water to cover the pyramids. So think about the volumes of water that we're talking about it would take to move that much sand to cover the pyramids in Giza. And if Graham Hancock is correct, which I do believe that he is, that there were two floods.
Okay.
One 12,000 years ago and one 11,000 years ago. One 12,000 BC, one 11,000 BC. Then that means that there was a tremendous amount of water that made its way from the northern polar ice cap and engulfed the planet, not just through like tidal waves, like what we might have seen with Atlantis and the sinking of Atlantis in a single night, but also through tremendous amounts of rainfall, rain for 40 days and 40 nights, right? Noah's Ark, all of that stuff, which, by the way, the Old Testament and the Genesis and all that stuff was actually largely taken from the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, right? So there's these legends throughout human history, whether they be the Vedas and nuclear war and Holocaust and us being like bottlenecked through nuclear Holocaust, or our species being bottlenecked through a massive flood. There are these legends that are rooted in truth and reality. And the fact that they are pervasive throughout all indigenous cultures should give everybody pause and cause them to question modern archaeological narrative and modern anthropological philosophy.
No, that's brilliantly said. I think it was actually on your post. It had something to do with, like, we'll buy into the narrative of, say, dinosaurs, right? But shh, what's a dragon, right? Hush down, folks. That's mythological. Why? And I like to play with that notion for a moment. Like, why? And it's the supposition, if dragons were real, and I think there's an argument that can easily be made to say that they absolutely were, right? But why would people have such an issue with believing in dragons, yet, they'll believe in a T-Rex or fucking, 90 other variants of dinosaurs? Where do you think they get people to kind of say, yeah, I believe in it like that, but no, that's too much for me?
I think it has everything to do with the sensationalizing of the mythos of dragons. Modern paleontology has asserted that there are bones all across the globe of ancient life forms. And we have discovered that this is in fact true, whether it be trilobites or chrysomeridian fishes or whatever that we find in stone. We also find bones of what we theorize are ancient reptiles. Now, interesting enough, I think it was in Colorado or maybe it was Utah, there was a find where there were human footprints, fossilized human footprints, next to fossilized dinosaur footprints. And some people took some pictures of it. They told people about it. And they said they were going to go back and take some plasters of these footprints. And then lo and behold, when they came back, somebody had taken a hammer and chisel to the footprints. That would indicate that either one, dinosaurs were around far earlier than we would like to believe or have been told, or two, that humanity is far older than we have been led to believe, millions upon millions of years old. So if you look into the lore about dragons, it's not just in Asia.
Right.
It's also in Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent.
Europe, medieval.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think what it comes down to is mythos and the sensationalizing of certain narratives versus others. I think when something is sensationalized to capture the imagination of people, there is also an attempt to make the fish go from being this big to being this big.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And in the process, the story, the truth is convoluted and it becomes obscure. And then it gets associated even tangentially with fiction because the fish went from being this big to being this big, right? We are a species that have been strategically led into a false worldview because like I said before, if you can control a person's perception of the past, you can control their perception of the present and what direction they go in the future. So we as individuals must emancipate our minds from illusions. And it's very difficult for people to do because it's easier to fool people than convince them they've been fooled.
Yes.
And that is because people don't want to believe that they've been fooled, because then they feel foolish, right? So they would rather reject the message and the messenger than absorb it in a way that not only makes them look foolish in the society, but also causes them to feel foolish internally, and then also question all of their first premises, question all of their beliefs. And that is a cognitive dissonance that very few people have the stomach for.
I agree, and that's why I love the flat Earth debate so much, because when people go through and they start going down those rabbit holes, even if you don't believe in it, to be able to question that, like, hey, I came up in school and this is what I've been taught, and to go back and to actually scrutinize something and then come to the determination of actually looking at things in life, I think is actually how we grow. And by the way, what's your thoughts on that? Is the Earth flat or sphere, or what's your belief when it gets to flat Earth?
The Earth is what is called a spherical geodesic.
Okay.
It is a series of interlocking electromagnetic triangles that create a spherical shape. Now, that would also parallel along with the ley lines.
Okay.
And so these electromagnetic triangles that are created all over the planet are a result of numerous different electromagnetic lines that run across the entire circumference of the Earth. I don't believe that the Earth is flat at all. I do think that it is far more likely that the Earth is hollow, but not hollow in the way that most people might believe. Hollow in the sense that the center of the Earth is not a iron and nickel core, but rather a plasmic core. And that plasmic core is similar to almost like a second sun.
Okay.
Inside of the center of the Earth. And when you look into ancient legends, you find all over the planet that there is talk of the inner Earth and whole other ecosystems being below the crust and being illuminated by some sort of luminescence that they know not the origins of.
So you believe in Agatha, I believe is what it's called, right? Hollow Earth? That or no?
I don't know. I tend to try not to believe anything unless I've experienced it.
That's fair.
My mind is open because of the profound boundary dissolving things I have experienced. My mind is open to all sorts of things that most people's minds are closed to. But when it comes to things like Tartaria and stuff like that, and the mud flood, I don't believe that.
Okay.
I think that is just propaganda, the misinformation. Now, the taking down of all the bells, I think, is very suspect. But, and I think it's entirely possible. In fact, I think it is the case that we had a civilization around the planet that did permeate free, infinite, clean, wireless electricity to their civilization. Was that in the 1800s? I don't think so. Is it possible that it was what gave the ancient Egyptians the technological prowess that they exercised? Yes, absolutely. But I don't believe that the ancient Egyptian civilization was 5,000 BC or 4,000 years ago or whatever, 5,000 years ago. I believe that the ancient Egyptian civilization, and this is indicative of why it is that there is so much attempts to control the archaeological narrative. If ancient Egypt was actually older than 10,000 BC, then that changes the entirety of our history. And if you look at the water erosion on the Sphinx, then that indicates that the Sphinx is far older than we've been led to believe. And if you look at the direction that the Sphinx is facing, and the way that it faces the rising sun on the spring equinox, and then you map when it is, because the Sphinx was not given a man's head. It was originally a lion, and the man's head was carved into the stone after this flood had taken place and wiped away a lot of the stone. If you look at the direction the Sphinx is facing, and the fact that it's facing the eastern equinoctic sun, then you parallel that with the constellation of Leo rising with the spring equinox during the age of Leo, then that actually sets the creation of the Sphinx and the pyramids to be somewhere around 10,000 BC.
See, this is why I wanted to have somebody like you on, buddy, because the fact that I'm listening to, I know you're not full of shit, right? And you can hold your own. And just to feel so wrong, to know, like you said, you have to acknowledge that, you were foolish, right? Or that you did something. This is one of those pleasant reminders, to myself of why it's okay to be wrong, why it's okay to seek out different information from people, Now, with that being said, you ran for Congress, right?
Yes.
Now, do you have any further plans to get into politics? Are you looking at another run? Do you want to kind of go down this route with me for a minute? Because honestly,
Sure.
I think you would have a good future in politics, right? I mean, you're an outsider. It's not really the type of person that's, going to get corrupted. But, time will tell, right? Before January 6th, it wasn't like you had a whole bunch of criminal offenses under your belt or anything. I mean, you're a normal, good-hearted guy. Yeah, tell me about your political aspirations and where you're going with that.
Well, I'm more of a spiritual activist than a political one.
Okay.
So, first of all, the reason I didn't get on the ballot is because the law has been tailored as such here in Arizona to essentially ensure that third-party candidates don't get on the ballot. If you are a Republican running in Arizona, you need only get Republican signatures to get on the ballot for, the petition. Same thing with the Democrat. If you're a Democrat, you need only get Democrat signatures. However, if you are a third-party candidate, it is required of you to get both libertarian, independent, and no party affiliation. Okay. Now, why did they do that? You would think, well, that would make it easier. No, it actually makes it more difficult because you are only required to get 0.5% of the signatures required. I mean, of the registered political party that you're affiliated with. You only need to get 0.5% of the registered voters in the area that you are running. Right. So I was running in Congressional District 8 here in Phoenix, Arizona. And there are a total of 3,000 or so, maybe a little more, like 3,300 people in District 8 in Arizona that are registered libertarian. But then there's also an even larger number of independents that are registered here in District 8. And there's an even larger amount of no party affiliation. Now, if I were being treated the way that the Republicans or the Democrats are being treated, and all I had to do was get libertarian signatures because that's what I was running under, then I would have to get 0.5% of 3,000 or so voters that are registered libertarians, which means I would only have to get 19 or so signatures to get on the ballot. But because they broadened it through law and said you have to pool from independent, libertarian, and no party affiliation, I had to get something like 800 signatures. Now, this is what's interesting about that. Because I'm running as a libertarian, I only technically have access to the 3,000 or so libertarians that are in my district as far as their voter information and all that stuff. But I don't have access to the independents or the no party affiliation, which would thusly make door knocking really fruitless because there's more Democrats and Republicans in my district than there are libertarian, no party affiliation, and independent. So what that means is that I would have to essentially get 1/3 or so of the libertarian registered voters to sign my petition in order to actually get on the ballot. You see, because I don't have access to the independence and the no party affiliation information.
Right. Yeah. You got to maximize with what little you already have, which is already, yeah. You're fighting an uphill battle.
And the God love them, the Libertarian Party is not very organized. They're not very well funded. They, in my opinion, along with a lot of, in particular, like precinct committeemen and stuff like that are both Republican and Democrat, from what I can tell, these people are just attempting to role play founding fathers. They want to pretend like they have some sort of a say in their political system, but when it really comes down to it, they're not willing. Like, if a Republican or a Democrat is running, then the Republican or the Democrat Party usually says, okay, well, let's help you get the signatures to get on the ballot. If you're running as a libertarian, and to a certain extent I understand this, but I also don't, the Libertarian Party says, well, get the signatures and then we'll talk about endorsements. And it's like, well, hold on, dude. Like, you got all these Republicans and Democrats running, and they're getting plenty of resources from their party. But as a libertarian, you're complaining that the two-party system is corrupt, but you're not willing to help candidates get on the fucking ballot? Give me a break. No wonder your candidates never make it. No wonder people are laughing at you. And the thing is in my case in particular, they had somebody that had more face recognition, more name recognition than probably any candidate they've ever had before. They also had somebody that was more well-spoken and sharper than any candidate that I've ever seen that's libertarian and on the ballot, aside from Ron Paul, but he had to go Republican. So they had an opportunity and they squandered it. One thing I can tell you is that as I ran for office, I got to see some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, in particular with the Republican Party.
Okay.
And everything they accuse the Democrats of doing, they themselves are also doing behind the scenes. Okay? We're talking about purchasing endorsements, purchasing signatures. We're talking about backdoor deals. I'll give you a spot in my cabinet if you just endorse me, or, let's run on a golden ticket together. I'll endorse you. You endorse me. We'll go to campaign events together, And then there's also the added element where anybody across the nation can contribute money to a local person's campaign. Why? Why is somebody in New York contributing to the campaign of a local person here in Arizona?
It's a beautiful question, isn't it?
Yeah, like what's actually going on here? Right? Do these people represent the people, or do they represent their donors? And if their donors have the biggest and deepest pockets, then do those donors have a vested interest in ensuring certain people get into office and not others? There's also the grooming of the next generation of political representatives on behalf of people that are already in or are running for office. So in that sense, they are the ones selecting the candidates for the people before they ever even know these people are going to run and try to fill the shoes of the individual that is currently running or already in office. So these things are pervasive on both sides of the uniparty establishment.
So does that mean most likely...
So I'm sorry, really quick. So in short, I have no interest in mud wrestling with alligators in the DC swamp. If you look at, for example, the treatment of George Santos. Now, I don't like George Santos very much, okay? But what he did is nothing compared to what Menendez did.
Agreed.
Literally taking gold plates as bribes for selling secrets. But there's no censuring or expelling Menendez from the Congress, but they get rid of Santos? Like, and then there's also, I forgot the guy's name, that congressman. He was in a wheelchair. I think he was from like South Carolina or something, that got invited to like these cocaine-fueled orgies.
And they yeeted him right out.
And they booted his ass right out as soon as he started talking about it. So I thought to myself, well, even if I do get in Congress, what is the likelihood that I'm going to stay especially if I'm representing the American people and calling out all these corrupt sons of bitches in the Capitol, right? Likely not long.
Do you feel like places like X then give you a good platform to kind of put out your voice and to put out a message and to connect with people? Well,
it's most certainly a better platform than Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. All of those locations literally have my face in their algorithm. They have my name in their algorithm. They get anyone and everyone that posts videos like that on YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok. They get taken down immediately. And I don't even have to have my horns and face paint on. They literally have my face, like it is now, in their algorithm so that it gets censored immediately. X at least isn't doing that. And say what you will about things like shadow banning, which, I mean, shadow banning is still taking place on X. And in that regard, it isn't fully free speech. It's more free speech than anywhere else. I would certainly like it if things like shadow banning were not a part of X and their algorithm. But unfortunately, at this point, that's the case. I also kind of have a little bit of, more than a little bit of suspicion about the fact that Elon Musk hired a World Economic Forum connected CEO. But that being said, X is probably the best thing that we have going for us right now. And for Elon Musk for buying Twitter, I salute him and I thank him. I'm hopeful that things will only improve.
Right on. I think that's a good take on the deal overall. Do you have a message? Do you have something that you would want people to know? Just something on your own, like do you have an event coming up? Is there something that you feel is important that people know about you, or is there information for people somewhere they can look up information on you? You know, like what do you want to let the world know unopposed? You know, with no preemptive questioning.
My story is not important. What I think of myself or what I want for myself, I don't think is as important as what it is that I want for humanity, what I want for all life on this planet, what I want for the United States of America. We are currently living within a system that has been monopolized, and monopolized by less than 1% of the global population. So that less than 1% of the global population is not just controlling, but profiting from human slavery. You know, old slaves were in chains. New slaves are in debt.
Right.
And the currency system that we are dealing with is the root of global corruption. The banks are near the top of this socioeconomic geopolitical pyramid. Below them are the corporations, and below them are the governments, and below them are the people. Now, is that the way that it should be? No. Is that the way that it currently is? Yes. So I'm of the belief that we need to render this monopolized system of what is called full spectrum dominance obsolete. Full spectrum dominance is a military term. And what it means is control of, number one, the psychology of, or the minds of a nation through things like psyops, psychological warfare, and propaganda. And once you have controlled the minds of the population, and you have that under your full spectrum dominance, you then are able to control the land, the seas, the air and the airspace, subterranean, minerals, resources, and deep underground military bases, extraterrestrial, space and satellites, technological, cell phone towers, radio, computers, television, chemical and biological weapons and agents, the medical system, the food, the water, and the currency. That is full spectrum dominance. And it's where you have control over every aspect of people's lives and everything that they need in order to live, right? So the less than 1% of the global population has full spectrum dominance control over the entirety of our infrastructure. In order for humanity to be free, not just now, but long term, because if this is the situation we're in now, think about where we're going to be 7 generations away, right? It will be Skynet, totalitarian Terminator type scenario. In order to free humanity now and in the future, we have to create a decentralized grid system. We have to create a decentralized currency. We have to create a currency that actually has real value. We have to create a whole new system that is outside of the full spectrum dominant system of these less than 1%ers, as I like to call them. Some people call them globalists or the elite. I call them what they are, less than 1%ers. Because then that puts in my mind and reminds me every day that we outnumber them thousands, hundreds of thousands to 1.
Right.
Maybe even millions to 1. And in that sense, it kind of places in my mind the reminder that they are actually very weak, right? They might have these systems of control, but at the end of the day, they're very weak. And that's why they're so intense with their propaganda or with their initiation of force. So how do we render this system obsolete? It's actually very simple. Number 1, Nikola Tesla and his Tesla towers or his Tesla coils. We're talking about infinite, free, clean, wireless electricity using the electromagnetic ley lines of the planet and where they cross to disseminate or permeate the ecosystem with infinite, free, clean, wireless electricity. Okay? So literally putting the power back in the hands of the people. You can also use these towers to create a whole new global communication grid without the need for 5G cell phone towers or satellites or any of that electromagnetic polluting garbage. All right? You also have the ability to use these towers to do things like control the weather without the need for things like HARP or chemtrails or stratospheric aerosol injections. So we can now steer hurricanes and tornadoes away from cities as opposed to into them. We can also do things like, for example, get rid of all of the soft metals that are in the upper atmosphere. We can also do things like water crops with rain as opposed to watering them with sprinklers and stuff like that, using the groundwater. We can also do things like use these towers and frequencies that emanate from them in conjunction with the growth of organic crops to not just repel pests and insects, but also to increase the rate and the growth of plants exponentially. So we will have an abundance of food. So we're talking about a new energy infrastructure, a new communication infrastructure. We're talking about a new agricultural infrastructure. And we can even use these ley lines as a new transportation infrastructure where these ley lines can be used like electromagnetic highways in combination with things like, for example, what the during the Trump administration in 2020, there were 3 patents that were released by they were filed by a guy named Salvador Payas. One is a 0-point energy engine that is infinite clean electricity. There's something called a room temperature or high temperature superconductor that allows a 0-point energy engine to function without overheating, and something called a TR3B. It's a triangular shaped anti-gravity or inertia propulsion craft that can take you from LA to DC in the snap of a finger. Okay. So you can actually use these aerial vehicles, not just to traverse the air, but also to go down to the bottom of the ocean and go out into outer space. So we can then start doing things like mining asteroid fields, so we don't need to mine our ecosystems. We can do things like colonize Mars and the moon, etc. And so then this notion of overpopulation is absolutely ludicrous, because we can actually start to colonize these other places and permeate our solar system or even our galaxy with life. And then there's also, so that's a transportation and supply chain infrastructure that's new and outside of the full spectrum dominant system. And then there's also things like Dr. Rife, that's Royal Raymond Rife, R-I-F-E, and the machine that he was working on with Nikola Tesla in the 1930s to basically use frequency and vibration to not just increase human health, but also to destroy disease. So now we would have a whole new medical apparatus, a whole new medical infrastructure that's outside of this big pharma owned and controlled, Rockefeller controlled medicine. Then we'd also could implement things like, for example, cryptocurrency, which is entirely decentralized. Things like a precious metal backed currency. That way we literally have something of value in our pockets, not just these debt based Federal Reserve notes. We could also literally transform the ecosystem of our planet so that we're not having a parasitic relationship with the environment where we just take and waste and destroy ecosystems, but rather we would have a symbiotic relationship of give and take with the ecosystem, with the environment, through this new system that I'm talking about. And in the process, we need not fight the old system. We can actually use the old system as scaffolding to create this new infrastructure, to create this new system. And then eventually, similar to scaffolding around a building, it will just be disassembled once the building is complete, right? This is the message that I bring to the people, is that non-compliance with tyranny is the ultimate statement of freedom. And only through non-compliance will we, the people, be able to suffocate the fire of tyranny. We need not comply with evil. Gandhi said, if you cooperate with an evil system, you contribute to its evil. Right? And Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So why are we continuously complying with evil and tyranny and expecting something good? That's insane. That doesn't make any sense. What we have to do is, I think it was Plato, or maybe it was Aristotle, that said, you don't want to use your energy to fight the old, you want to use your energy to build the new. So instead of using our energy to fight this system of full spectrum dominance, instead we should be using our energy to build something new that makes the old system obsolete. We need to use these tools that are essential for not just our survival, but the survival of all species on the planet and future generations. Now, if you look into all evolutionary adaptation throughout human history, whether it be the invention of the wheel or the discovery of fire, or all the way to things like the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the information age, etc., what you find is a couple of things, or even things like spiritual evolution, like with Christ or Buddha. What you find is three things. Number one, tremendous amounts of social or environmental pressure that are being placed on the people that make survival very difficult, but also create a window of opportunity in space and time in history that can be used to circumvent the social and environmental pressure. Number two, what you find is self-selected individuals or groups of individuals that create either a new tool, a new mental model of a reality, or a new form of behavior that allows them to circumvent the social and environmental pressure. They walk through this window of opportunity through the use of this new tool, mental model, or form of behavior, and they begin to not just survive, but thrive in the presence of the social and environmental pressure. And lastly, the third thing is, what ends up taking place here is that the tribe who is suffering, or the nation that is suffering during the social and environmental pressure, sees that these individuals or this individual is thriving based on the application of one or all of these three things. And then they begin to adapt and adopt these things into their repertoire so that they can too thrive, whether it be in the new tool, the new mental model, or the new form of behavior. And then through the example of this individual or group of individuals, the tribe then begins to change their thoughts, coming back to what we were talking about before, change their dialogue, change their words, change their relationship with each other, so that the social and environmental pressure is rendered negligible. And they all begin to thrive based on this evolutionary adaptation. Now, if we look at the Tesla towers, if we look at the patents that were released in 2020, and we look at Dr. Reif's machine, or we look at the cryptocurrency or precious metal-backed currency, what we find is those are all new tools. And in order to understand how these new tools can save us, we have to have a new mental model of reality, right? We have to see how it is that these technologies work through the use of energy, frequency, and vibration. And Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So we begin to understand the secrets of the universe when we start to implement this technology and learn how it works. We start to understand the secrets behind financial slavery and financial liberation when we start to use these decentralized currencies. We start to understand the secrets of medicine and the human body when we start to implement Dr. Reif's machine into our repertoire of medication and treatments. And the new form of behavior is just simply non-compliance, non-violent, non-cooperation with the old system and with tyranny. And that is the ultimate step toward rendering this old system obsolete. Because if we turn to violence, then these less than 1%ers can say that they are behaving as the law. They are behaving as some sort of a ordering force in chaos, which is the very thing that they're hoping for, actually, that we will violently revolt. So we don't want to give them what they want. We want to incorporate new tools. We want to incorporate a new mental model and a new form of behavior during this social and environmental pressure that they are strategically creating to try to foment violence and chaos. So we give them the exact opposite of that. And that is my proposal.
No, I like it. And even down to the, consent, right? It's the people are to be governed, and we're governed from the consent of the people. So everything that you're speaking of, I think, fall in lines with the Constitution. I love the aspect that you're there and you're not following for like the violence bait, right? Because they want people to go out there and push that, and that's how you're gonna get your feds going from monitoring your social media profile to knocking on your door and saying, we got to have a talk today, buddy. Which is and like Biden, he kind of let the cat out the bag, but he did say something that fit. If you're gonna go up against them in a violent, I mean, you're gonna need fucking F-18s and shit, right? Like, you're not going to win that war with even fucking ARs, right? So yeah,
But it is important that we note, if these kind of abuses are being perpetrated on us while we are armed, what kind of abuses will be perpetrated on us if we are not? So that is important, that we not give up our sovereignty and not give up our right to bear arms. Yes, that is correct. The government has drones and F-18s. They got directed energy weapons. They've got weather manipulation technology. They've got all sorts of shit, psychotronic weaponry. They've got all sorts of things in the repertoire, and that's why violence isn't going to work. That's why ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to recognize that the real battle is for our mind, for our hearts and our minds. And this comes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of our conversation, about thoughts and emotions, words and actions, and the effect that they have on others and on ourselves. And so if we truly wish to reclaim our nation and our planet, we have to have a spiritual evolution.
No, I think that's spot on. I think it's important that people use their voice and not be scared into silence. I think I think January 6th actually, that was part of its purpose was to make people shut up, because do you want the broom? Do you want the belt? Cuz we'll fucking bring it on you people. So shut up. And I think that's why you don't see conservatives really out there getting involved in protest or whatever because they're probably afraid there's going to be some feds in the crowd and they'll do what they do to delegitimize the voice that's out there. But at the same point, that cannot be acceptable from people. You got to use your voice, and silence in a certain form is compliance, right? Like he said. So even just the fact of stepping up to say I don't consent or I don't agree with you is extremely important, and that also lets others out there know that they're not alone. And to me, stuff like that is extremely important. And I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your voice with me, my dude. I'm not some big guy, but I love interesting people, man. And I feel like there's we only scratch the surface, dude. With only the surface. By the way, first off, two things from doing research. Your mom is a G, like 100%, dude. So tell her if you ever want that Templar said, yo, I loved her interview. Dude, your mom, dude. Wow. All right. And then outside of that, your interview with David, what is it, Peakman or whatever, right after, well, it's like 5 months ago, I think, actually, you guys had one. Dude, that made me so angry, right? Like, I'm watching this interview with you guys, and I kept getting frustrated because you want to talk about moving the goalpost. You want to talk about a intellectually dishonest conversation. That whole interview, in my opinion, was absolutely that. That was not journalism. And he kept moving like, I got you. And you start articulating these points. Well, okay, then let's talk about, we can't go over all those points here. And then he moved the goal point. And then you guys would start talking. And then he'd bring out his stuff and lay it on you. And then, no, stay within, like a kid who's going to fucking walk home with his ball if you don't play, right? So I think you handled that extremely professional, and you did a great job on that interview. But dude, I can tell you from being an outsider watching that, it was so frustrating to watch. But I did notice there's a lot of people when they're interviewing you that take that approach. They're not just letting you answer the question. They'll kind of start to ask you something, you start going in, but they already have the rest of the built-in narrative follow-up push. What would you say, like 80% of your interviews go that way or so? Like,
no, I mean, with the liberals or the left, absolutely, that has been the case. One thing you got to remember is that these media types have a financial interest and therefore an intellectually vested interest in maintaining their narrative for their audience. They likely came out when all this stuff happened with January 6th, pointed the finger at me and said, horned man bad, horned man crazy. So if I then come onto their platform and debunk that simply by being myself, then they look very, very non-credible. They themselves look like they are pushing disinformation and misinformation to their audience, and their audience wants to hate me.
Right. Yeah.
Right. They want to have their confirmation bias and their illusions reinforced. They don't want to have them challenged. When it comes to smaller platforms like yourself, I've actually been treated very well. When it comes to even bigger platforms like Benny Johnson or Michael Knowles or even Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson, they've given me a little bit of room to run. And for that, I'm grateful. I just wish I had more time with Tucker Carlson. But at the end of the day, the narrative about me is so heavily distorted that the people on the left must maintain their illusions for their audience. Otherwise, they discredit themselves. And that's why they're like a kid that is holding onto their ball and they're going to go home with it if you don't play their game, right? And it is a rigged game. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to change my approach. I am more about creating unity. I'm more about dissolving the divisive narrative and creating a mental ground that we can all agree on. And that is not something, in many cases, even that some of the conservatives are interested in doing. And I honestly think whether it be conservative influencers, I think that those people are in some ways just as controlled as the people on the left. A lot of these conservative influencers, other than the ones that I've already named, a lot of the conservative influencers have no problem talking about me and how wrong what the government did to me was, but they have not the courage to converse with me on their platforms. And I think that that is indicative of a certain level of either cowardice or even controlled opposition, or a certain level of primary interest in monetization and the maintenance of their base for monetary gain. Which none of those reasons are good.
No, and I would go to say it's probably a mixture of all that, right? It's a soup of all that. And that's actually something that I've been recognizing. And I had the luxury of having a interview with Johnny Vidmore the other night. Are you familiar with him? What an amazing dude. Like, for the rest of the night, I took my son out for dinner and whatnot and came back. And I just couldn't get our conversation out of my head, right? It was one of those when you sit down and you really have a... I was going somewhere with that. I'm sorry, and I just lost my own... Oh, I'm sorry.
Right?
No, there was a point that I was going with that. So, and we kind of touched on that as a point. And I noticed that, you know, like, everybody's aware of, like, the Sinclair Media meme, right? Where 100 different stations are saying the exact same thing verbatim, right? But I don't think what people are recognizing is that you're seeing that on X as well, right? Pick your major big people anytime a story comes, and it's cut and paste journalism. They're using the same visual clips, right? They're using the same talking points. And when something changes, right? Like the other day, everybody was out about FISA, right? How it shouldn't, or how we got to vote against it. And that vote happens, and Trump came out and basically gave some cover for Johnson, and everybody shut the fuck up, right? Nobody knew what they should talk about or what opinion they should give because they were scared. And that disgusted me, right? Like, disgusted me, because you can't call yourself a journalism on X if you're not going to actually, like, voice your opinion, you know? Like, so I've recognized that I see a lot more of that on there. And I'm hoping people become aware of that, you know, like, don't think just because it's not TV that they can't get to them too. You know what I mean? And that people won't want to look the other way because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to get reduced views. They don't want to, you know, walk away from Elon dollars, etc. Do you got anything you can add to that, since I kind of went on a diatribe?
Well, just that largely that you're correct, that it is cut and paste journalism with a lot of these people. And a lot of it is around oriented around generating clicks, views, money. To that extent, while I am appreciative for the monetization of Twitter for smaller accounts and bigger accounts, and Elon giving people a chance to make some money, I think that's great. It also kind of is a double-edged sword, because of the fact that people don't want to lose their followers. They don't want to lose the money. They don't want to lose the clicks. And there is a certain level of fear associated with going outside of the narrative or going outside of what they believe people want to hear. That's also why I don't really participate in much of that bullshit. My narrative, when you said, so is there anything you want to talk about that, you now know what my passion is. You now know what it is that I'm all about. and it's creating a decentralized grid, a decentralized system that puts literally the power and the money back in the hands of the people, not just now, but for long term. If only we had more people that had larger accounts on X than myself doing that, then we might actually see some change. But change is not lucrative for the status quo. And if you have these major corporations that are essentially controlling the landscape, then you're going to get more of what you always got. At the end of the day, I'm disappointed in a lot of people because these are individuals that I really hoped would step up, hold the line, and even, shall we say, advance a new narrative that causes the less than 1%ers to be on the defensive. But that isn't happening. It's all more of the same. It's reactionary. You see, so and this is the thing about psychological warfare, is that you have external stimuli that people have an emotional or instinctual response to. And then through that emotional or instinctual response, you hijack their subconscious perception of reality and therefore their conscious perception of reality. And then you have them locked inside the narrative that you control. What I'm all about is like, okay, let's not do that. How about instead of reacting to everything, why don't we act consciously toward the end that we desire? Because if we're always reacting, then we're always on the defensive.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's brilliant, brother. Absolutely brilliant. See, man, people need more of you. They just don't realize it, brother. You know what I mean? Like, they don't. Is there anyone you're looking to work with, or you got anything in the works that you're doing with people?
No, I mean, I'm kind of a lone wolf, I'm a solitary lion here. That isn't to say that I wouldn't like to have a pack, but very few people I've found are not just, I don't want to say on my level, but they're not prepared. They don't understand the vision, and they are playing in the sandbox that's been given to them by the intel agencies, whether consciously or unconsciously. And I refuse to do that. So in that sense, I suppose maybe I'm a real hot potato for a lot of these conservative influencers. I've also heard that there's people that actually likely fear having me on their platform because it would become quite obvious to their audience that I'm different. That in some cases, I mean, some people have asserted that they're afraid that they will be shadowed, that some of these people are worried that I might basically show them up. And so they would rather keep me at a distance. I don't know how true that is. I really don't know, dude. Why certain people haven't reached out, I don't know. Why some people have reached out, and then when I reach out again, when I reach back to them and say, yeah, let's do something, then I get ghosted. I don't know why that's happening. To me, it doesn't make sense. I wonder if there's people behind the scenes that are like, oh, no. No, we can't talk to him. We can't have him on. I don't know what the deal is. But I think that my conversation with you is evidence that, and my conversation with the left, I'll talk to anybody pretty much.
Yeah, no, and it's awesome, and I would recommend that you do. I can add some validity, like, so with you coming on, right? I had considered, like, okay, am I gonna end up on a like fucking watch list somewhere? Maybe, probably. Okay, check. Is this going to potentially be an issue? Is someone going to see that I had an interview with them and have a knee-jerk reaction, and now all of a sudden they don't want to follow or watch my content anymore? Okay, yeah, that'll probably be in there. Check. And I went through all these things, but I also thought, like, does that matter? No, because I want to know, I want to hear something interesting right? And I find this guy interesting, so I want to pull his cord, see what the fuck comes out, and if somebody's gonna like be all butthurt over that, well then that's kind of on them, right? But also at the same point, maybe some people are gonna like be able to just see you and open their eyes and be like, oh, hey, that's that guy, you know, and then actually see that, you know, you're a sharp dude, you're focused, you're well adjusted, you're not the insane caricature that they tried to present you as. And speaking to you, I can now have a greater appreciation and understanding of why they did that, you know, to you. It makes sense, you know, because it's easier to squash and marginalize somebody if you paint them as a crazy fool, right? And that is my determination out of looking into you, is that, you know, the what the media presented you to be and who you are completely two different things. I'm extremely grateful that you gave me time to come on here and communicate with me. And I hope that, you know, like it wasn't such a shit show for you, that you'll actually come on again in the future, brother, because
I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. And in all honesty, I think what you may find, if anything, and this is something that I think that a lot of people are pleasantly surprised about, that do decide to interview me, is that there's actually a tremendous amount of support that follows me. I knew somebody that knew somebody who was working at Facebook, and they were conversing about the fact that they knew me with this person that worked at Facebook, and they're like, dude, that guy has so much support that he knows people in Facebook that are in charge of deactivating accounts, and they've said that they've deactivated hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts because they support me on Facebook. And I also think that what a lot of people are worried about, the whole thing, like, for example, with being on a list. Look, I know these people that make these lists very, very well. Okay, not like personally, but I know their strategy. I know how this shit works. Okay, you're probably already on one. And these people that are these big conservative influencers, guess what? They most certainly are already on one. So having this fear or trepidation about conversing with me on a platform and helping to dissolve the illusions that have been created, if anything, it's only going to garner them, the people that are putting me out there, more support. And it's only going to dissolve the support for the system that tried to destroy my image. When those two things are combined, the thought patterns, the words, the dialogue, everything changes, you see? So when it comes down to it, in my opinion, it's actually a bad strategic move for people to allow fear to govern their decisions. It is a bad tactic to allow the narrative to win, because then, and this is the interesting part, then if and when the system goes after these other people, which it will, they will then have a taste of what it is like what they did to me. But if they use the opportunity to interview me on their platform to show how wrong the system is and how big the lie actually is, then if and when the system goes after them, they will have, their audience will have this thing in their hip pocket of like, well, they were all wrong about this guy. So they've got to be all, and I know I've watched this person on this platform for so long, I know they have to be wrong about this. So then it will just create more questions, more dissenting. And that can't be bad for anybody except for the totalitarian less than 1%ers.
Absolutely, man. And well said. And that's an important point, right? That hopefully people watching or listening will actually pay attention to. You know, it does nothing but help you to take away the illusion of what they're trying to set up on these false narratives on people. And the more that we can show that they're fucking liars and that they manipulate, then the better it is. Because when that gets turned on you, if it ever does, I can't imagine it's a good feeling, right? And not everybody's built for that, right? When you're on multiple television shows and people are shitting on you and your image and whatever nonstop, day in, day out. Like I understand why some people can have a mental breakdown on that kind of stuff, right? Like not everybody has the intestinal fortitude to still stand up, especially to go back out there and to take their name. So yeah, dude, like I love that fight about you, and I think that you have a great message, dude. And I don't find you to be a clickbaity bastard or full of shit. I think there's a lot of profound insight within you, and I'm not discouraged one bit to voice support, for you. Um, the whole way through for this interview, you've been nothing but very relaxed and gentlemen. It's been very easy. There's been no kind of ego, no have your people call my people. They can do lunch kind of shit, like you've been very solid, and I appreciate that as well, man. I give you the final say, and we'll kind of make sure that this goes off. And I'd like to talk to you just briefly outside of the interview.
Sure. Final point. Never underestimate your own power. That is exactly what the less than 1%ers want, is for you to underestimate yourself, for you not to realize the profundity of your personal impact in the world and on others. If and when you step into your power, will there be challenges? Absolutely. But those challenges will only make you stronger and better. If I can go through what I went through and come out a better, stronger, smarter, more patient, wiser man, then so too can you go through anything and everything that God has in store for you and become better for it. So too can you give the finger to the devil and continue to traverse down the right and righteous path. That is the very thing that the less than 1%ers fear, is you as an individual and we as a collective becoming fully conscious of our power. Because if and when that happens, the game's over. It's checkmate. That is the thing that they are trying to keep the lid on more than anything, is your spiritual power. Coming back to what we talked about in the beginning, the rice, the Dr. Emoto stuff, you have tremendous, like universal level power within your heart, within your soul and spirit. You just have to unleash it. You just have to use it. And when you use it for good, you get more.
Just brilliantly said, brother. Brilliantly said. And let's just end it on that, man. Dude, I'm so glad that people get to see this side of you, man. And I hope people actually, take a vested interest, and to learn more. Is it your website, forbiddenknowledge.com?
No. ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. That's Forbidden Truth, TRUTH Academy.com. If you like what you've heard here, we have all sorts of free courses. There's free podcasts you can listen to. A bunch of my interviews are on there. It's all for free. We have some awesome merchandise if you'd like to rock some merchandise. My book is also for sale on my website. It's very cheap. It's only $9.99. It's only 150 pages. It's called One Mind at a Time, A Deep State of Illusion by Jake Angeli. If you want to know and understand everything there is to know and understand about the deep state and have a big picture view, read that book. Also, if you want to book me for an interview, you can find that on the website as well. Or if you'd like a personal spiritual consultation, you can book me for one of those on the website as well. And if you want to look into what my political platform was and why the establishment was so hell-bent and scared, so hell-bent on making sure people like myself don't get on the ballot, then you can go to my website, shamanforcongress.com. That's shaman for Congress, FOR, Congress.com. And you can see what it is that my platform was. You can see my political interviews. You can see why it is that nobody else measures up. So there you have it. Oh, and also on Rumble. I'm on Rumble, Yellowstone Wolf AZ. That is Yellowstone Wolf AZ, all one word, Yellowstone Wolf AZ on Rumble. Literally dozens of hours of free content, stuff like we got one that's called Just Take the Red Pill. It's 5.5 hours. Everything that you need to know is in that 5.5 hours. There's also one called God is Real and Reincarnation is Physics. It's all the metaphysical stuff that you need to know if you want to transcend or ascend. There's also one called Aliens Walking Among Us. If you're into the whole extraterrestrial interdimensional thing, I break down how it is that extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings have been here for millennia, how it is that there is currently an agenda between light and dark forces in the spirit world over this planet and where we're going. There's also another one on there called Understanding Enemy Strategy. Understanding the enemy strategy is about 4 hours, but it explains in detail how it is that this big picture deep state works, where you have these international institutions like the WEF, the IMF, the UN, etc., the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Committee of 300, how it is that these international institutions work together with the deep state here in the United States and abroad to control things on a local level through like the state deep states that we're seeing, like in Arizona or in Georgia or New York or California, etc. Just breaks it all down and shows what their strategy is, how it leads to transhumanism, how it leads to AI taking over the planet, all sorts of crazy shit.
And what's your handle on X?
Oh, and the handle on X is @AmericaShaman. That's America Shaman. @AmericaShaman on X.
And do you have a podcast, or you got anything like that in the works?
Well, kind of. I had one starting out when I first got out of prison, but kind of put it on ice for a bit. I might start one up just myself because I was working with a couple of people with that. I might just start one up myself on my own in the near future. I've thought a lot about it, and I probably will. And if and when that happens, you'll know it. You'll know it just as much as everybody else because I'm going to push it.
Right on. Yeah, I think you would do great in it, man. I think you're one of those guys that's interesting, and yeah. So if you choose to do it, I mean, I'll be a viewer or listener. I'll definitely support you, brother. Yeah, I love what you're doing. I'm gonna kill this. We can talk after. But how do you say your last name again, buddy? By the way, so I don't like butcher it out.
Angeli.
Angeli. Is that Italian?
Yeah. Yes. It means angels.
Okay. And is it Jake or Jacob?
Well, I mean, my legal name is Jacob, but I go by Jake.
All right, man, brother. I appreciate it so much. I'm gonna kill this out and talk to you. Dude, it's definitely been a treat.